The original, primal user interface is the human hand, unifying control of our gadgets and devices through gesture. I'm Tonya Hall, and joining me is John Underkoffler, founder and CEO of Oblong Industries. Welcome, John.
Thanks, Tonya. Great to be back.
Well, thanks again for joining us, and thanks again for coming back. So for those who may not actually have seen any of your previous interviews, explain the problems that Oblong Industries solves.
Whoa, okay. Well, it has not solved my inability to get a haircut. So for your viewers who are tonsorially minded, I apologize. I'm going to get this fixed shortly. You can just cover that part of the screen. Oblong has been around since about 2006, 2007. We've been on a mission really to, I don't want to say reform, but to advance the state of user interface, which from my point of view, from my money, and from Oblong's point of view, is in a kind of dire state of stasis. The converse of that, and has been at the core of our thesis at Oblong all along, is if you can build a real new UI, get it broadly out into the world, then you will enable unimaginable new kinds of work, enable new kinds of value creation, and a whole bunch of other stuff, not just quantitative, but qualitative. It's not that people would be able to do more things the same things faster, but we're talking about letting people do entirely new kinds of things. And all of this really for us comes to a head in the manifestation as Mezzanine, which is our product family around collaboration. Because if I had to name one thing that our current very, very old conception of UI doesn't let people do, it's collaborate, right? The UI that's on your smartphone, on your tablet, on your laptop, on your desktop machine is fine. It's very sparkly and very nice, but it was always and only ever intended to serve the needs of one person at a time. So this fundamental idea that, yeah, we need to work together. We're only going to make it through the 21st century if we figure out how to collaborate in really deep ways as a species, as organizations, as peoples, as nations, as governments, whatever it is going to require collaboration. But these tools, these digital tools that we've based our entire society on, are not ready for collaboration, not at least the way I know that it could be. So Oblong really is in the business of solving the collaboration problem through the lens of new user interface.
You're a pioneer in the user interface gesture control universe. In fact, to help set the stage, give us a brief summary of your contributions to movies, Minority Report, and Iron Man.
Well, whether they were contributions or not is really for you and your viewers to decide. I can just sort of describe what happened. But I view it in kind of three phases. One was that as a researcher and a graduate student at the MIT Media Lab back in the late 80s and early and mid, and unfortunately for my parents also moving into the late 90s, I was obsessed with the idea of UI, which is still where I'm working. And the idea that, you know, that there was the opportunity to do something really new and really huge that could change how humankind works with digital systems and make it a much more sort of human-centric proposition. And in those earliest experiments, I was already saying that, well, you know, we're not making great use of human hands, right? When they're on a keyboard, that's okay if you're typing text, if you're actually typing into a keyboard to emulate human language. But if you're using a mouse, then you're taking all of the degrees of freedom that this incredible instrument has, and you're kind of lopping it off, as it were, and just going down to kind of integer X and Y as you push the mouse around the mouse pad or your finger around the trackpad on your machine. So drop the mouse and let your hands do what hands do. Let them pick up objects and move things around. Let them, you know, grab objects and bring them toward you to understand them, to move objects around in space. And that led to a series of systems that I built at MIT that we called the luminous room. And it was the idea that you'd break open the display and let the pixels actually go onto surfaces in the room. So the pixels aren't trapped in the display anymore, as they are still today. They live on tables and on the floor and on the walls and wherever you might need to interact. And that interaction happens through hands, and often hands that are holding, you know, different objects that kind of work as tools or handles into the space. And those experiments were pretty exhilarating. They became very popular demos at the Media Lab. And one of the things that they did was to catch the attention of Alex McDowell, who was the production designer, or the production designer-elect, to use political terms, for the just greenlit film Minority Report. And this was in 2000 when I first met Alex. He saw the stuff I'd been doing at the Media Lab and said, wait a minute, this really solves the biggest design problem we have in Spielberg's film, which is what are computers going to look like? Well, not only what will they look like, how will people interact with them? And Spielberg had said, please tell me, don't tell me it's going to be keyboard and mice 50 years from now, which was when the movie was set. Let's do something new. And Alex felt that this idea of human hands, of big expanses of pixels, really was the answer to that question. So on Thanksgiving Day 2000, I moved out to LA and joined the art department, the production crew of Minority Report. Spent the next year of my life designing. Actually, I was responsible for all of the future tech that was seen in the movie. I didn't invent all of it myself, but curating it, inventing some of it, bolting it all together so it read as a coherent universe. And the biggest piece that I spent the most time on, because it was closest to home, was this future gestural, spatial, collaborative interface for the Tom Cruise character, and then increasingly other characters in the film's pre-crime scenes, the sort of forensic pre-detection scenes, to use. And the proposition there, from a filmic point of view, was the precogs are, for those of you who haven't seen the film, the precogs are, sadly floating around in their little milky bath, dreaming of violent crime all day long. Their dreams are kind of being transduced into video form and pictures. How, as a Tom Cruise super cop, can you make sense of all of those, that big jumble of images and video previsions or precognitions, so that you know where the crime is going to take place, who the perpetrator is, who the victim or victims are, what time it, what, where, when, who, and how, all that stuff. So you can scramble your police force to get there and intercept the crime before it happens. So this was a job for UI. This was a job not for AI, which Spielberg had already tackled the year or two before, but for UI. And secretly, that was my mission in designing this stuff, to show how powerful an appropriately designed UI could be. These are some of the best detectives in the world, but without these tools, without the UI to assist them, to kind of put on almost like gloves, which we will get to in a second, they don't have enough reach. And so the idea was, in those scenes, there's a giant curved screen, a vast expanse of pixels that can hold more information than one of these little screens. And that's a fundamental idea. Like, can you see enough? Can you see enough here? Well, yes, if it's a shopping list. No, if you're a city planner, or no, if you're, a security operator that needs to understand what's happening at the Port of Los Angeles, or any other kind of global scale problem space, or a brain surgeon, or whatever it is. So you need more pixels, you need more display space to understand the problem at scale. And then, how do you interact with it? Well, you're not, there with your face pressed up against all these pixels. You've backed off so you can see the whole thing, and that's where gesture comes in. Because gesture is, that incredible human, pointing in particular is where we have to sort of zero in, because pointing is that human reflex and human ability. It is a gesture that is spatial, so it connects your body in a visual sense to distant bits of information. And it does it in a social way so that other people who are looking at you can tell what you're pointing at. So the simple proposition there was, let's let the machine also understand what's being pointed at. And suddenly you've got action at a distance. You've got a whole bunch of images that you need to work with. Well, just grab them from across the room. You can see them, you can point at them. Your eyes have incredible fidelity and angular accuracy, so does pointing. Grab it, move it, juxtapose it, use a whole gestural language to operate this kind of mega visual space. And boy, that's a lot of talking, I'm sorry. But I designed the gestural language, trained the actors, and when it came time to film, even though there was nothing on the screens, the actors knew what they'd be seeing. They knew what was happening, and they were driving those systems, even though it was kind of an act of imagination. But we rehearsed. They knew why they were doing this, and they knew that it was one finger point versus two finger point. The whole language was already embedded in these actors' heads. And they were, in a sense, the world's first users of mezzanine. It's just that we hadn't founded Oblong and hadn't built it yet.
So just because we can do something
Yep.
doesn't mean we should.
No, ma'am. Agreed.
What factors determine whether a particular function is a good candidate for gesture control or maybe not?
Well, and I think that this set of metrics, this set of criteria isn't unique to gesture. It applies to any proposed, interface technology or interface modality. Could you do the same thing better and faster, maybe even cheaper with existing techniques? Right. So that's the first cutoff. In this case, you've got giant screens arrayed around the room. The operators of the system are standing back from it. They don't, a mouse doesn't make sense. Direct touch doesn't make sense because you're not there. And if you said, well, touch should do it, then you've got people running around a big space to touch. That's not good. Gesture is great because you've got this kind of angle multiplier thing. You can stand back and still access a 100-foot wall of pixels, as we do, 40-foot wall actually, at our secret warehouse here in Los Angeles, and that's a topic for a different day. On the other hand, if there were some existing methodology or interface modality that could get at the needs of some system that you're designing or planning, there's no need to reach for something just because it's new or just because it's sort of technically exciting. So it has to be motivated. When you reach for a new UI technology, it should be motivated by something.
Are the underlying technologies needed to implement mobile device gesture control mature enough to be effective today?
I think we're about to learn, and there's we know that almost all of the major smartphone handset, do we still say handset? I'd like to. Handset manufacturers are incorporating some or other, technology around gesture control or depth sensing. Everybody's got some version of this in here. I think that the underlying technologies, the raw technologies, are probably close enough to do some interesting things. The question, and it's going to play out in real time now, is how they're being applied. What do you get to do with, gesture control or proximity control or eye tracking or whatever the application is in the context of a phone and the phone's existing UI?
Is there any merit in employing the talent of or creativity of musicians, stage performers, dancers, or other artists in helping maybe formulate gesture UI?
Constantly, and not just gesture UI, any UI. I mean, I'm pretty volubly on record as saying that the worst place to go for new UI inspiration is existing UI. It's too small a field. It's not old enough. Instead, we have to look at the rest of the existing world, and especially those parts of the human world that are about synthesis, creation, creativity. So I think, UI needs to look at cinema. It needs to look at architecture. It needs to look at biology. There's A, B, C, not in that order, and so on through the alphabet. D, dance, is a really superb fourth category. So what do all of these disciplines have in common? Well, they're all about space. They're all about the ways that human bodies move through and make use of physical space. We build architecture to house and guide human activity. We dance to interpret emotion and narrative and story, and we do it in space. Biology has spent 3 to 4 billion years figuring out how to arrange itself in space and how to swim toward or away from things that it wants to eat or not get eaten by, and so forth. And cinema is maybe the greatest human invention that talks about space. It talks about how stories occupy space, how causal events, this because of that, and therefore that, and then the next thing is this, move through space, and how that intersects with emotional and narrative trajectories. So all of these things comprise just the world's greatest source of inspiration, and in some cases directly actionable interface design elements that we could hope for. And it's just a matter really of going to that library and checking out as many books as you can.
What feature or function, if you will, in the 21st century office, automobile, or smart home is begging for disruption by gesture control?
I think, we're, as technology inventors, practitioners, whatever you want to call us, we tend to think in very isolated and modular, isolated and not nearly modular enough ways, which is kind of the whole history of technology-based invention. It's sort of one device, one invention, and often in isolation from a larger context. So where I'm going with that, because I can tell already from the sentence that it's not clear, is that we see gesture control being applied to video games that we know will be hooked up to someone's, impressively large TV in their living room, but just that one device. I think gesture, this is really important, more generally, spatial interface. So whether you're using your hands, whether your phone, is newly a thing that can point accurately around the room, whether you have just happen to have this on my desk. It's a new 3D printed model. Whether you've got a special purpose spatial pointing wand, or whether you have appropriately configured fruit. I just have things on my desk, so I'm holding them up. With whatever it is, sometimes there's an argument for it not being bare hands and rather being a tool that has other functionality, like a phone. Anyway, whatever it is, spatial is kind of the surrounding category that encapsulates gesture, let's say. But whether it's gesture or whether it's more generally spatial control, if you're in the middle of a room and that room has a whole lot of devices, as rooms increasingly do, I think there's an enormous opportunity, like a human cognitive opportunity, a commercial opportunity for whoever figures this out, a UI opportunity for someone to do the right thing finally and give us a better future around bringing all of the functionality of these different devices together through a single UI, a spatial UI, right? So if it's the phone, great. If your phone can point at the thermostat, the smart thermostat, and your TV, and if you can drag the show that you're watching in the living room from that TV to the kitchen, because you've got to go in and get some, health conscious yeast snaps or Entenmann's donuts or whatever it is you need to get, or up to your bedroom because you want to, finish your Alfred Hitchcock Presents show, while you drift off to sleep or whatever. Like that idea that you connect technology in a space that's well-defined because it's your house, it's your environment, and it's not you kind of projecting your consciousness into one device at a time, but it's rather you saying, this is my house, and I'm going to move this from here to here, and I know where all the stuff is. I think that's enormously powerful, and that's a step that no one has quite said that they're ready for yet. But I bet that you and I are ready for it.
Well, I know I am, John, and thanks for giving us some insight on that. John Underkoffler, founder and CEO of Oblong Industries. If somebody wants to connect with you, maybe they want some more of your insight or maybe the best recipe for bread, how can they do that?
The very best thing to do is to go to oblong.com, simply spelled and punctuated, like the very best websites. On Twitter, I'm lamentably unprolific, but I'm John_under. And you can see a little bit of history there. And then just a regular old search engine search around all the obvious words and names will do a good job. But go to oblong.com.
So you're not on TikTok, John? I mean, come on.
What?
Yeah.
No, I know what you're talking about. I just haven't had time.
All right. Thanks again, John. And if you guys want to find more of my interviews, you can do that right here or go to tonyahall.net. Thanks for watching.